You are listening to Radio Ramadan 365 podcasts.
Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh Saab. Chapter 18. Chapter 18, Escaping Your Identity. In this chapter, you describe the common, the elite, and the elite of the elite. Would you tell us more about this?
Yeah, this is obviously contentious language today because, we live in such an egalitarian age that to speak about the elite and the common and the elite of the elite seems like a little almost like politically incorrect. But when I speak about the common and the elite of the elite, I'm not speaking about social status. It's not hierarchical in that sense. It's not about education or religious reputation or social standing or influence in the world. What I'm trying to get at is the issue of identity. I'm speaking about how tightly a person is bound by the story of themselves that they tell themselves, the story that they tell about themselves. So the common are people who are completely identified with their conditioning. This is a person who is their biography. They are the story they tell themselves about their life. They are their successes and their wounds. They are their culture, their opinions, and their grievances. Their life is largely reactive because their conditioning has produced their conditional motive, which produces this ongoing struggle for getting stuff from the world. So in that sense, the world is in charge because they're trying to get stuff. They are moved by what they like and by what they fear. They seek security in outcomes. They seek the recognition in the eyes of others and the comfort in belonging. But there's not, so there's not, one mustn't see this as like a fallen state. There's nothing evil in this. It's simply our default human condition. It is the being that our socialization and our community seeks to produce and does produce successfully. It's the being that is useful to others. But such a person is not free. By the rule that if you want something from the other's ability to withhold what you want makes you manipulable. If you this collection of needs and desires and conditional motive, trying to get stuff from the world, you're a slave. You're being driven by what you need from the world. Now, the elite, by contrast, they're basically people who have begun to question their identity. They've seen a glimpse that beyond the self, there's the one who sees, there's the seer. And that the person that they think they are, this self, is a construct. This biography of theirs, this kind of narrative of their successes and their wounds, this culture, this is purely a story they tell themselves. As reactions, see their fears and their pride as pride. There's a distance. You see, you're no longer examining the world for being the source of your happiness or unhappiness. You're seeing the way in which what you construct as making you happy or unhappy, that is where the source of your unhappiness or unhappiness is. So there's a distance. You start seeing, you're not, the one who is seeing is not the self. You're looking at the self. You begin to act with intention rather than impulse. And this person begins to forgive rather than accuse. They begin to give rather than trade. They start to escape the transaction. Now, so there's a really great nobility in this thing. It requires to lose your grip on the familiarity of your mask, of persona. I beg your pardon. The elite of the elite are those who have completely foregone the idea that they are a person in the world. They've completely disassociated with how they appear. They are the ones who disappear. They get so inwardly gathered that they disappear into the spaciousness behind their eyes. And this is not dramatic. This is not like going up in a puff of smoke in a public place. I mean, this is like, it is not theatrical at all. Very quiet. And it happens incrementally. And it happens incrementally because they incrementally cease to defend an image. They no longer need to be seen in a particular way. Their concern is no longer with how they appear. Their concern is how they serve. They act in the interest of the other without calculating what returns to them. Their happiness is no longer tied to outcomes. They become inwardly gathered. They've stepped out of the compulsion to manage the future. And in this, they've tasted freedom, which is why they are the elite of the elite. So this is what I mean by not becoming nobody in a nihilistic sense. It is about becoming nobody so that Allah can be the somebody in you. It is the gradual relinquishing of the small and contracted self for the vastness from which you operate, the vastness that perceives through you. You know, the common, if you like, protect their identity. The elite examine their identity. The elite of the elite have escaped their identity. They've outgrown their identity. And in outgrowing their identity, they discover what they discover isn't like an emptiness. It's not a nihilistic emptiness, but it's this fullness that I described before, this fullness that spontaneously empties, because it's based on a deep intimacy with the real, with Allah, the one who is the heart of your heart, the one closer to you than your jugular.
Thank you. Thank you for that. The whole of Deen can either be about identity or a vehicle of transformation. Can you talk to that?
This is true. It's one that sometimes gets me into deep trouble because, you know, how do people apprehend their deen? Most people see their deen as an identity, and it's actually quite a combative identity. You know, and what I mean by combative, it's a competitive identity. It's like, you know, how often don't you come across text, for instance, or insist on demonstrating the superiority of the deen above other things. You know, we were the first, you know, the real scientists in the world. Modern medicine owes its existence to Ibn Sina, and you know, this historical significance. And I mean, I dare say that this is not an illegitimate thing to do. I mean, in its subtlest sense, your deen can be, if you like, how can I put it? It can be like a magic carpet to escape identity, you know, to disappear, not to appear. So when deen is identity, it answers the question, who am I? You know, I am a Muslim. I belong to this group. I hold these views. I follow this school. It gives me structure. It gives me belonging and certainty. That's quite legitimate. But there's nothing inherently wrong with this. But every human being seeks that orientation. But when deen is primarily about identity, it becomes something to defend. Like I indicated, we need to engage these arguments to present to the world just how superior we are. You know, it becomes something to compare. It becomes something that therefore can be threatened. You know, or that somebody, if we say, well, we're the first scientists, or that somebody needs to suggest that we weren't. And now suddenly we are now in a position that we have to defend. And then the energy of the deen is spent on being right, on proving, on distinguishing yourself from others. And that's exactly how the thrives on being distinct, on being significant, you know. Now, when you see your deen as transformation, the question shifts. It's no longer who am I, but what am I? That shift is no longer it's no longer one that sort of examines and makes significant the one who appears in the world, the persona, the face, the mask, the biography that appears in the world. It is like asking it, so what am I? It's a deep question. Is that what is the thing that's looking, the thing that's behind this persona? And then it's almost as if you, in order to pursue that investigation of what am I, you're kind of saying, what part of me must die for me to experience what I actually, what I am? What this looker who's looking through this persona, what is that? So my identity with a persona has to be disconnected. It has to die. But then the practices of the deen are no longer like badges. They're sort of like things. Look, I'm a person who prays. Look, I'm a person who fasts. Because they're not mechanisms whereby you appear. They're mechanisms whereby you submit, whereby you die, whereby you disappear. So then your salah is no longer a proof of righteousness, but it's a means of softening. Your dhikr is no longer like a performance, to be seen with a tasbih, but it's a dissolution. And fasting isn't a display, but it's an exposure of inner poverty. So in a sense, it's every one of them is no longer an act of appearing. They're acts of disappearing. They're little deaths, So you sort of, that means that there's no longer a methodology, or it's no longer, it's not concerned with your identity. It's actually a methodology to escape your identity. Your identity consolidates the self, your idea of who you are. And if you use deen as idea, you become more and more solid. You become more of an object in the world, one that is seen, one who's trying to appear. Whereas if you use deen as transformation, then its boundaries become thin. You become more transparent. This is identity. It strengthens kind of your position in the world, because the second weakens your position in the world, but it strengthens your intimacy with Allah. So the tragedy is that the nafs prefers identity because it makes it feel powerful. But that feeling of power is completely illusory, because that sense of power comes at the price of contending with other than you, the non-Muslim, and that contending with other than you is always, by definition, a contention with something that is bigger than you. The pursuit of vilification is not a legitimate path for the common. It's a legitimate path for the elite. So when I say to pursue vilification is a legitimate path, I don't mean by this that one should kind of commit haram, or that you should mock the Sharia, or deliberately act in a way to scandalize believers. I mean, that's not freedom. That's arrogance. The story about the Rumi and Shams is not about alcohol. It's about reputation. It's about the tyranny of being seen to be pious and behaving in such a way that how you are seen is inordinately important to you. Because when your concern is with how you are seen, then your concern is with the self, the one that is seen, the persona, the mask in the world. But we're saying there's a part of you which is deeper than that which is seen, and that is the one, the seer, that which sits behind the mask. Now, if you consider that Rumi was a respected imam, that he was honored and admired and affirmed by people, then how he was seen was, I mean, he succeeded at the project of being a person among people. He had succeeded at the project of being respectable. Now, that sense of being significant in the eyes of others then becomes a prison, because you are so invested in being seen as righteous that your deen becomes identity, and you're now maintaining an image. So your sense of nafs, your sense of self, becomes very comfortable inside this sort of appearance of religiosity or appearance of piety. But to walk through the market with what appeared to be a jar of alcohol was to risk the collapse of that image. It was to taste vilification. It was to feel that the eyes of the people change, and to discover, so what's real here? I mean, is if they no longer see me as pious, am I still close to the Rabb or not? And the discoverer of real closeness to the Rabb is by definition not concerned with how you are seen, with how you appear in the world, but it is your inner experience. So the pursuit of vilification, or the path of vilification, is really, it's a means of freeing yourself from the need to be approved of by others. It is so that your obedience to Allah is no longer dependent on on being seen to be obedient. It means that your sincerity is they're no longer tied to applause. But do be careful with this, because this is a dangerous idea. I mean, for the common, Sharia is protection. I mean, the structure is protection. We're not asked to scandalize society. We're not asked to undermine trust. We're asked to play games with sacred limits. I mean, deliberately committing to sin to prove detachment is itself a form of nafs. It's itself a form of ego and of kind of claiming personhood. The statement, "Look at how free I am," is not freedom. It's more exhibitionism.
Right.
How does this idea of the pursuit of vilification, I mean, how does it place us? And what is the usefulness? It's an inward use. If you examine how much your practice is dependent on being seen and being approved of, with people praising you, then understand your practice is not transformational. It is not helping you get closer to the Rabb. You don't necessarily have to carry a jar of wine through the market. I mean, your life brings you enough moments where you are going to be misjudged, criticized, overlooked, and even falsely accused. Those are your jars. You don't need the market. You don't need this display of rebellion. So what happens then when you rush to defend your image is that you're no longer anchored in Allah. The common protects their reputation. The seeker examines his attachment to his reputation. So the seeker is one who is free and is no longer governed by it, by his reputation.
Thank you very much for that, Sheikh, for that explanation. So, in kind of summary, if you see a pious man walking down a town centre with a jar of alcohol, we will judge him.
Yes, of course we will. And in a sense we should. But the man who's deliberately walking down, doing the equivalent of walking down the town center with a jar of alcohol, you know, this person might actually be trying to, you know, just escape the idea that they're a person. They might be on the path of liberation.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you very much, Sheikh Saab.
Thank you, sir.